Hey friends, what's going on? It's Luke from Madman Music, and I'm here again with Open Mic today to give you some advice on finding a professional recording studio and engineer to work with. If you're thinking of taking the leap into doing music professionally, one of the most vital components is the music itself. It has to sound great, clear, well recorded, and really resonate with a lot of your fans. One of the many ways to do this is by sourcing out and working with a professional recording studio and engineer or producer who will work on the track with you and take it from the very beginning right to the very end. But obviously there's a lot of choice out there, and how do you know who are the sharks in the industry and who are not? Hopefully in this video I'll explain to you how to source out a professional engineer and recording studio so you can work on your next project. So before we jump into the part where we talk about how to find a studio and an engineer, we first must look at what the engineer does and what the studio does. So let's start by breaking down a recording studio. A professional studio is a dedicated facility where artists, musicians, orchestras, bands can go and rehearse, record their music, create songs, have demos arranged, and generally they offer support to artists in the surrounding area. A recording studio is a safe place where you can go and try out new ideas. You can be as loud as you want because no one's going to hear you because all the rooms are soundproofed. And you will normally have a team of people working there. The team of people can consist of mix engineers, mastering engineers, producers, mix assistants, and the general team that run the day-to-day tasks such as receptionists and cleaners. As I mentioned just before, most recording studios are designed to be soundproofed, so you can be as loud as you want in there and you won't hear a thing from the outside, and vice versa. A lot of recording studios will have practice rooms or rehearsal rooms. This is where bands, performing artists can go in and rehearse their craft, rehearse their songs without worrying about anybody listening in. They will also have dedicated studio rooms, and you may find that most recording studios have several rooms. There'll usually be a main studio A or studio 1, and then they'll have slightly smaller rooms where you can record also. In these studios, you'll usually have the control room. This is where the engineer or the producer sits, usually at that big mixing desk, and this is where everything happens. This is where everything is kind of controlled from. It's the operating station. It's where everything is managed and constructed. To the side of the main control room, you'll probably have a live room. And a live room is where you can record drums, groups of musicians, basically any bigger instrument that needs to be recorded, a string quartet, for example. And you may also find that there will be a vocal booth. A vocal booth is a dedicated room that's usually not too big, and it's very quiet in there, very silent. It cuts the vocalist off from the rest of the live room or the control room. It's dead silent, meaning you can get a super clean recording. Most recording studios will also have a kitchen and an area where you can go outside and chill out because, let's be fair, as fun as music is making, it is hard work and it can be tasking on the brain. So it's a good idea to step back and take a break every now and then. There are many other things associated with studios, but these will vary studio to studio, so it will be dependent on what you're looking for. And then, as mentioned before, you will tend to have teams of people at the studio working on different crafts, and we'll go over some of what they do now. The first and most popular person you'll find at a studio is a producer. A producer is the person who produces the project, like a managing director at a company or a project manager. They're the ones responsible for making sure the day runs smoothly and that everything is streamlined, coherent, and efficient. Producers are also there to give advice and offer any tips on songwriting or arranging, especially if you're a solo recording artist. Mixing engineers, they typically focus on engineering the mix of the song. So once the song has been produced by the producer and completely finished, what will happen is that producer will send off all the individual tracks, known as stems, to the mix engineer, and the mix engineer will then compile it into one project and start to balance it and make it sound professional, radio ready. Once the mix engineer has finished their job, the song will usually be sent off to the mastering engineer. Whilst the mix engineer balances all the tracks together and makes it sound great and coherent, a mastering engineer adds the final sheen to the song. They'll bring it up in volume and just make sure it is super well balanced so that it translates well onto lots of other speakers. Because people listen to lots of music on smartphones, tablets, earphones, computers, monitors, TVs, smart speakers, you name it. The song has to translate well to those systems. And that's where the mastering engineer comes in. And what you'll sometimes find is that you can have one person actually completing all of these tasks by themselves. You'll find that there is a producer who is also a mix engineer and also a mastering engineer. So it's not uncommon to find one person who can take you through all these stages. Okay, so the big question, how do I find a good producer and recording studio to work with? Let's start with finding a good recording studio. You need to first ask yourself a few questions. Number one, does that studio have all the things that we spoke about earlier in the video? Does it have all these different rooms? Does it have a team of people? Does it have the right engineer there for you to work with? Do you get a good vibe when you go and visit it? A few other questions you can ask yourself is, how local is the studio? How far out do you want to travel? There are studios all over the UK and across the world. So which one is best for you? One that's further out or one that's a bit closer? Have you had any personal recommendations from friends? Maybe they've recorded at studios before and recommend a certain one. How many instruments are you looking to record? If you are a solo artist and you don't need to record any more than your voice, well then you could probably get away with recording at a smaller studio. You wouldn't need a space as big. If you were recording a string quartet or an orchestra, well then you'd be looking at something way bigger, something that can house a whole bunch of people. Do you have a producer or are you looking to find one? Most recording studios will have in-house producers that you can research and look up and find out a bit about them to see if they're the right fit for you. What's your budget? Recording studios all have different rates and will offer different prices, different deals. It's up to you to decide what your budget is and how much you're willing to spend. That might dictate what you can get done in a certain amount of time with one studio as opposed to another. How long do you want to record for? If you know you're recording an album, you probably want to be recording for about a couple of weeks to make sure that you get everything down. This will tie into what your budget is. Do you have enough budget to cover the cost of the studio overheads for a couple of weeks? Are your recordings part of an overall project, like an EP, or as mentioned before, an album? Maybe you only need to record a certain song at a certain studio because it has the right room or it has the right instruments there for you to use, and then you can finish off the album elsewhere. These are some of the really great questions that you can ask yourself to really make sure and find out if a recording studio is right for you. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what you're looking for because there are so many variables and it all comes down to what you are after as the music artist. So now that we've got that out of the way and you think you found a studio, well, how do you find a producer? Well, there's a couple of ways to approach this. With the studio that you've sourced, you can look at their in-house producers and start asking yourself some questions. Or you can alternatively find producers and outsource them yourself. There are lots of freelance producers who will go and work at various studios. As mentioned before, the music is so important to you and your career. So it's good to make sure you have good chemistry with the producer and that they understand your vision and you can work well together. So how do we pick the right producer? A great and obvious point is picking one in your genre. If you are a pop artist, you're not going to achieve the results that you want with a rock producer. They'll be more adept at recording bands, whereas there'll be another producer who works solely with singers only, and they would be more understanding of your sound. If you're a band, well, you probably wouldn't go and work with an EDM producer. You're not there to record an electronic dance track. You're there to record a rock track. You want it to be big and punchy. Therefore, a rock producer or a metal producer would work better. The other thing to consider is that some producers can work in a variety of genres. I myself, I'm a producer. I'm a multi-musician and I've produced metal records, pop records, R&B, soul. It all just depends on the catalogue and portfolio of that person. Which leads me on to my next point. Do your research. Look into the producer. Do they have a bio? Could you ask people about them? Has anyone worked with them before? Try and find out as much as you can about this producer and see if they'd be a right fit for you. Be clear with your goals. It's good to know what your goals are going in because when you converse and discuss your project with the producer, you want to make sure that your goals are understood by them and that they can really embrace what you're trying to achieve. Once you've established a producer to work with and you know what your goals are, then you can approach that producer and ask for samples to their work if you haven't found them on their website already. Any good producer should have a portfolio or a catalogue ready to send you within an instance. In these early stages as well, it's also a good idea to keep an eye on how they communicate. Can you easily understand what they're saying? Can they understand what you're saying? Is the communication effective, easy? Are they accessible? Are they clear up front? If there's any uncertainty, make sure you ask just to fully understand and clarify the situation. And if there is still uncertainty in the playing field, then that might be a red flag to say, step away, maybe find somebody new. As I mentioned before, get advice from anybody that's worked with them before. If you are working with a producer who is local to a certain city, you may find plenty of other musicians who have worked with them as well. You can find these musicians on forums, like subreddits, Facebook groups, Twitter, things like that. And if you're a performing musician on the scene, you'll probably know people anyway who have worked with said people. Also, check out testimonials as well. These are a big indicator as to how well that producer works. And another consideration as well is think about their location. Are they local to you? Are they at the recording studio you sourced and found? Or are they further out? Will they need to come in? If they need to come into the studio you want to work at, you may need to cover the cost of their travel. If you're going to work with them, then you may have to pay more for your travel. In the current climate, you may find that you can run sessions on Zoom. I personally run a lot of sessions on Zoom, and I find this to be very effective. But this all comes down to if you're feeling confident. You have to feel confident moving forward with the producer. Don't let their words or the things that they say sugarcoat what you're trying to achieve, what you're looking for. Really take a step back, look at the bigger picture and ask yourself, do I feel really confident with working with this producer? After you've asked all the right questions, you should have a good understanding of how they are and how they will act. Use this and go with your gut feeling. And hopefully, by asking all these questions and doing your research, you should find yourself a great studio to work at and a producer to work with. They can both go hand in hand or they can be worked on separately. But either way, you just need to be confident and assured in your own decisions when you're approaching a recording studio or a recording engineer. Hope you found this video useful. As always, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.